Hi, I'm Nancy Rathbun from Completely Quilted, and today I'm going to be demonstrating month 5 of your Curve It Up block of the month, which is the 9 patch.
So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew your 9 patch together. So if you notice, the 9 patch is not equal pieces, it's squares with rectangles sewn in between. So you'll cut all of your pieces according to the pattern direction, and then go ahead and sew your 9 patch together. And now we're going to cut this 9 patch apart with our quick curve ruler. So I'm going to start by positioning that 2.5 inch vertical line on the edge of one side, and then I want to make sure always that my square is centered. So it looks like this is going to be centered between these dashed lines here, the kind of heavy dashed line. Okay, and then I'm going to cut that curve. And you're going to keep doing this for all of the sides. My rotate is. Same thing with the 2.5 line. And then you still want to position that corner and split the difference there. So now this block is going to have white borders sewn around each edge. So this block has a lot of borders and kind of corner squares on it. So there's my 9 patch with my curves cut. So now I'm ready to cut my borders that are going to be sewn around this. So it's going to start with a square, and we're going to cut all of our strips from this square here. So I'm going to start on my 2 3/4 line. I've just marked my ruler with a little dry erase marker. That kind of helps me read the pattern and then mark kind of where I'm cutting. I'm going to cut that first part. That's going to be a little waist. Then I'm going to look here at the intersection between the 4 and the 2 here. There's kind of a little dot. And then down here, the intersection of the 10 and the 4. And I'm going to center this between the 1.5 and 10.5 lines. So I've got my square centered, and I'm just going to make sure that those intersections here, where you can see my little dot, that's resting right on the curve. And then I'm going to cut this strip. And that's going to be sewn. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And I just shift it up and still make sure that those intersections here are on that curve. And I'll need 4 of those. You see, I have a little bit of square up room, but not a whole lot. So then these are going to border my 9 patch. While I've got my cutting going, I'm going to go ahead and cut the next step. So the next step, I'm going to get 2 curves out of this rectangle, so there's a lot less waste in my fabric. And I've gone ahead and marked this little notches here according to my pattern instructions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest that open part of my ruler where I'm going to cut one side on that notch here where I marked, and the other side is going to be the intersection of the rectangle. So you kind of position it and then kind of have to sort of move it again. Okay, and then I'm going to cut that. So sort of a half circle or quarter circle, and then I'm just going to rotate that piece and do the same thing with my mark and my corner. So these 4 pieces aren't necessarily perfectly symmetrical, but it gives us the curve we need, and it will also get squared up later on. So you'll also do this to a color for the corners, and that's the same thing here. Pretty stress-free cut. So now I'm ready to do some of my sewing, and then I'll show you how this is going to get squared up. Alright, so now I'm ready to sew these borders along the 9 patch. So I'm going to keep the edge here even for the first step, even with the point of my 9 patch. So I'm keeping that even. I'm just going to take a few stitches here. And like always when I do my curve piecing, I just want to keep those fabrics separate. And I might need to raise my presser foot every once in a while to make sure that I don't have like a little ripple there in my fabric. And I'm always going to handle that pretty gently because I really don't want to stretch out that fabric, and it's pretty easy to do. All the way to the other end. So I've got one side done. Now I'm going to do the opposite side. The same thing, keeping those edges even. You're really not sewing on much on that corner because it's such a thin little point. And now I'm going to press this away from my 9 patch. So I'm going to press that away. So now when I sew my next 2 sides on, you can see here this white part is extending beyond the point. Okay? And I want the second cream piece, or the background piece, the second white piece that I sew, is going to be 1/4 of an inch past where you see the point of that 9 patch. So 1/4 of an inch past the 9 patch, from the edge of the background to where that point extends. That way you have a little bit of overlap at each corner. Alright, now I'm going to square this block up to 12 inches. So I'm going to use my square ruler. So first thing I want to do is I want to find the center here of my block with my ruler, which is going to be at the 6-inch intersection. So I'm going to look at these 6-inch lines on my ruler, and I'm going to find that point where 6 inches meets up. You can see I've got my 6-inch line here, right, splitting right through that point of my 9 patch, and I'm going to have my 6-inch line here also, splitting right through my 9 patch. So there's my center right here. So then I'm going to cut off what's beyond the ruler here. Okay, so those are nice and flat. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm also going to look at those 2 lines I just cut, and I want to make sure that those are on my 12-inch line here on my ruler. So 12-inch and 12-inch, and I want to still make sure that my 6-inch lines are pretty square right in there. I might have to rotate it just a little bit to get it closer. Alright, and then I'm going to cut these 2 off as well. So now that's been squared up to 12 inches. Okay, so the next step is going to be sewing our curved corners, all 4 of these, on each border. So we'll just keep building these curves around this block, so then we'll have the square. Okay, so now I'm ready to sew my corners onto my 9 patch. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this, not a 1/4 of an inch, just 1/8 of an inch past this corner edge. So about 1/8 of an inch, which is 1/2 of a quarter, it's real small. And I'm going to stitch this down. Now the square, I'm going to square this up again with my square ruler, and this is going to be squared up to 11.5 inches. So still want to center this as best I can. So I'm just going to take off a little bit all the way around. Kind of want to look here at the edge of my points now, and I want to take off just about, it looks like an inch off each one to make that 11 and a half and to make that even. So I'm kind of looking at the point, and I've got about an inch out here, about an inch. It's just like a little bit smaller than an inch on each one. All right. Now I'm going to cut these two outside edges. I'm going to rotate everything. And then I'm going to line that cut edge up with the 11 and a half. I'm going to cut my next two edges. Alright, so my next sewing step is going to be sewing just real simple sashings to each edge. So now I'm going to sew these two sides on, the short sides, and then I'm going to sew my top and bottom. We won't be quite finished yet. But I'm going to sew these and then we're going to cut it again. Curves now on my, after I've sewn my borders on with my quick curve ruler. And so I've already marked my intersections. The center of the ruler here is the 6 line, and I'm going to come up 2 inches, and that's going to be the point, the corner of my block. And then I want to make sure that this intersection here, the 3-inch line with the 2-inch line, and down here, the 9-inch line with the 2-inch line, is right on the edge of my block. And you can see right here where my curve out is, and that's going to give me a nice even symmetrical circle each time I cut my corner. So basically I'm cutting just right beyond this yellow here. And I'm going to just position those markings again. So the last step is to sew your very last curve on each corner. And you can see that you've got plenty of room. It's this nice big corner, so that when we square that up, we are just going to square it right up to the outside edge pretty much. So now I've got one corner sewn on so I can show you. This block is going to be squared up. And we're just going to cut this corners. All the corners are just going to be cut just exactly even with the border strips on your block. And you'll just cut each corner exactly the same. And then your block will be finished.
Thank you for watching our demonstration of block number 5 of the Sew Kind of Wonderful block of the month. Be sure to subscribe and like our channel.